help everybody understand kind of how FedEx calculates and pays for fuel, and then I'll give a few more tips around it. So I'm going to start by talking you through how it works in the P&D side, and then I'll come back to line haul. So for P&D, you're going to get a weekly settlement from FedEx. These settlement statements, you're going to get them every single week, and it'll show you all the stops, all the packages you delivered, and it breaks down how much they're paying you for everything. And one of those components is the fuel surcharge. Now, this is the amount that FedEx is going to pay you per stop, and it's going to cover the price of fuel. So it'll be something like 20 cents, and you get 20 cents per stop to kind of cover your fuel expenses. And that surcharge is set at an initial amount when you first negotiate your contract, and then it's indexed against the current price of diesel fuel at that time. And then each week, as the price of fuel moves up and down, the fuel surcharge is going to adjust as well. So it is really important to note that on the P&D side, it is not designed to cover the entire cost of fuel. So it is going to help. It is going to cover some of your expense. And it's also a hedge against the price of fuel, because as it goes up, it adjusts as well. So it will never cover all of your fuel expense on the P&D side, or should not, in very rare cases maybe, but it is not designed to cover your entire fuel cost. So like Jesse talked about, your most important strategy here is to control your fuel efficiency as much as possible, and to prevent driver theft, and to have some way of understanding all of that data and tracking it to ultimately save as much money as you can, because FedEx is not covering the complete price of fuel here. So the biggest thing and the biggest recommendation that you need to hear when it comes to P&D and fuel is that you have to have a fuel card. There are lots of options. There's lots of vendors here. The one I would recommend is the Route Consultant Purchasing Alliance, the RCPA fuel card. It does everything I mentioned earlier. So it has controls to protect from driver theft. That needs to be a minimum. It's one of the reasons we often don't recommend using a credit card. It's really hard to stop driver theft in those areas. Beyond the things Jesse talked about, something I see all the time is, a driver that goes in to the gas station, uses their credit card, and tells them they want $30 on pump 2. And then when they filled up $10, they come back in and say, okay, actually, I don't need any more. Can you just give me the rest back as cash? And it is really hard to track that. So things like that are hard to track when you're at a credit card. You need something with controls at the fuel card level. You also, RCPA card also has an analytics dashboard to help you understand the fuel efficiency across your fleet and at the driver level, like Jesse's talking about. And the last thing you need just some kind of discount, anything to help you minimize the cost of fuel. And fuel cards in general should all do that. RCPA in particular does, and it's usable at any gas station that takes MasterCard. So you're benefiting there from the collective purchasing power of the entire contracting network. And it's been really difficult to do that before RCPA existed. It's one of those things FedEx has always done, of kind of fragmenting that power base. And so that is a way to take advantage of that, save a lot on fuel. And if you have any additional questions about that, or the RCPA fuel card in general, you can just reach out to rcpasave.com. They can help you out with all of that. But I need you to hear that if you're operating in the P&D space, you need a fuel card. Credit card's not sufficient. You need to operate there. That's the number one way, outside of all of the operational things you should be doing, to save on fuel. It's kind of a minimum. Day one as a new contractor, you need, along with all the other vendors, you need on day one a fuel card that you're giving to all of your drivers. Now, fuel surcharge works a little bit differently on the line haul side. So first is there's something called, it's the varying fuel mileage rate. Instead of being paid a per stop rate for P&D, in line haul, you're paid a mileage rate. So it's just an amount per mile that they pay. Now, importantly, that rate is indexed against the price of fuel in the market from which you dispatch. So if you leave from St. Louis and you're going to Phoenix, you're going to get a fuel surcharge based on St. Louis prices. And if you're going from Phoenix back to St. Louis, it's going to be based on the prices in Phoenix. So it also does vary week to week, the same way the P&D fuel charge does. So it's just based and looking at that price of diesel fuel each week. Now, On the line haul side, you do still want to get a fuel card. You do still want to encourage your drivers to be efficient, think through all of those behaviors that Jesse talked about on the P&D side. But there's another important additional factor there for line haul that a lot of people miss. I still see it all the time. And that is that you need to pay really close attention to where your drivers are filling up. One of the biggest benefits is that you can get wholesale prices on the pumps that are at the FedEx terminals. It's not at every terminal, but there are a large number of FedEx terminals that have pumps for the line haul contractors, and they're generally going to be better prices than anywhere else. The problem is, if you're not paying attention to it, drivers really like to go to places like Pilots and Loves, that they have their own loyalty cards. They like the showers, whatever reason it is, but you are sacrificing points of margin. It is a material amount by letting drivers go wherever they want for fuel. So it needs to be something that you're always looking at weekly to make sure that drivers are going to the right spot. And, I mentioned those settlement statements you get every week. It shows where they're filling up. So you get that information each week. You'll know where they're filling up. It's something you or your BC can be tracking. And it needs to be something you regularly watch and coach or even discipline your drivers around to make sure it is a priority in their minds. Also, like I said, it's on the settlement statements. So if you're evaluating a business that you're looking to buy for the first time, that is an area where if you see they're not filling up at FedEx terminals ever, that's an area where you know that you can come in on day one and make some changes and potentially save points of margin immediately. So that's just an upside for you as a buyer to know when you're coming in and see that. There will be times where you cannot always fill up at a FedEx terminal. It's just depending on where the run is. Maybe it's a run where that's going really far out to rural areas and there's not a good terminal to fill up at. So you still need a fuel card for line haul, something that's basically you're using as kind of your outside fuel card. So outside the terminals, you still want to find a way to track all of this, have data and still get discounts. So you might need kind of a 2-card strategy depending on where your runs are. So just keep that in mind. But really, as much as possible, you do need to try to stick to the FedEx terminals. And, I talk about how it's saving money, but I have seen contractors in the line haul space who are running new vehicles, so they're getting great fuel efficiency, and who are really fanatically managing this to make sure that their drivers are filling up at the right places and optimizing that fuel strategy. And not only is the fuel surcharge from FedEx covering their expense, it's more than the price they're paying for fuel. So it actually comes down to where they are profiting off of the fuel expense that FedEx is paying them. So some of that isn't just fuel strategy. It's going to tie back to fleet strategy as well. Having the right trucks on the road. So like Jesse talked about, there are very important considerations on the fleet strategy that tie into your fuel strategy that if you have any questions on, we can help. But this is a way that I've seen, large contractors turn fuel into a profit center for them just by beating that average that FedEx is planning and calculating around. So all that to say, everything we've talked through today, there are lots of things to be thinking about when it comes to controlling your fuel expenses. So this isn't just something you should look at as a line item. It is a part and should be a part of your kind of holistic strategy around the business. And you need to be building a culture that prioritizes those behaviors, prioritizing that fuel efficiency, and to partner with vendors like RCPA to help have the right fuel card in place and ensure that it's carried out.